I'm Gary Simon with Clean Start.
And I'm Tim Keller at Inventopia.
We're here at Inventopia. Talk a little bit about what it does. So, what's Inventopia, Tim?
So Inventopia is a business incubator. There's kind of two major domains that we help in. One is engineering, and the other is life sciences. So we have a full prototyping shop, 3D printers, CNC mill and lathe, full electronics prototyping. We have a large area where you can build robots, automated systems. We have people who are doing material science type things that need kind of shop and process space. But then also on the life science side, we have wet lab. We have smaller and larger lab rooms, biosafety cabinets, centrifuges, analytical balances, PCR machines, you name it, -80 freezer. There's all these things which are very, very expensive for anyone to get any access to. We basically have a shared model, right? You get a -80 freezer, it's $20,000. Nobody needs a full one. Actually, by the time you need a full one, you can afford your own. But if you're a small person and you need to be able to store your samples at -80 degrees, you just need a little spot. So we have one that everybody shares, and it makes it accessible for anybody.
So, then you've got the less capital intensive stuff. You've got autoclave, incubators, fume hoods, glove box.
Yep, all that stuff.
Yeah. So, how many people do you have back in the lab?
So I think at last count we're helping 26 companies, I think, right now.
Cool. So are they all resident here with space, or are some of them in and out?
They are along a whole spectrum. So that 26 includes people who have registered and they need a place of address because they are going to be getting an SBIR. And so they'll sign up before that. And then once they get their SBIR, they will get some lab space and then they'll execute. And that's really kind of one of the key things that I think most people don't realize about what we do is that when you are like a research heavy sort of thing, if you get an SBIR award, they want you to start spending the money within a month, right? And you have 6 months, maybe a year to do the work. The way that commercial real estate works, if you get your grant in a month and then you talk to a real estate broker, hey, I need lab space, and they say, oh, you only need it for 6 months, there are no real estate landlords that will work with you.
Right.
Period. That doesn't exist.
So this fills a real gap in the market for people that are trying to deal with the small grants.
Yeah, you need to be able to show up, do your work, and then log off, right? Normal commercial landlord will want to renovate the space for you, give you a 3 to 5 year lease. It just doesn't work for small startups.
So what are your tenants like most about Inventopia? Is it the flexibility?
Yeah, the absolute cost is low and it's flexible. Both of those are what startups need. Even when we have people who come and then they do the grant and then there's really not a there, they've kind of failed for I see that as a huge win because in any other situation, that person would be left with a 3-year lease.
Yes.
And a landlord breathing down their neck for the next payment and maybe personal bankruptcy. I mean, that happens all the time if you don't have this kind of setup. So you can come here, and even if you fail fast and you move on with your life.
And you don't have a big tail of costs following you.
Correct. And then, or if you succeed, you can scale out, right? So we had the solar panel robotics company that's part of Growth Factory. I met them, called Onsite Technologies, right?
Right.
They were here, they built 3 or 4 robots here, and now they're at a larger facility. And they were able to transition within a month as soon as they found
Didn't you
out.
have a chocolate company here or something like that?
Yeah, so that's California Cultured. They're actually still around here. They still come here to use some resources that we have and they don't at their new facility, but they got an investor who has a building in West Sac, and now they're moving from, they had a room that was maybe $2,000 worth of space here, and they're going to 20,000 square feet, I think, in that building. So big step up.
Absolutely, but also a success.
Also a success, yeah. And Interplant is also an alumni of this company. They got $16 million from John Deere.
Yeah, so they got bigger space.
Yeah, and so they're actually 1 block away on Cousteau. And so, they were able to come through when Inventopia moved here. They took our old spot, and so we try to keep people. I think that the key is to keep you flexible for as long as you want, right? That will A, keep you flexible, then B, keeping the overall cost down, because at the end of the day, if you're spending money on your idea, you want that money going into your team and into your technology, not to the overhead.
So what's the business deal here? Do you get memberships? Do you strike a deal negotiated individually? Do you take equity stakes in the companies that are here? How's that work?
Yeah, so I've always looked at this from like me as an entrepreneur, what would I want, right? As soon as you start dealing with equity, everything's really complicated, right? And so generally there's a membership, and there is a very it's as simple as we can make it kind of thing. If you take this much lab space, it costs this much. If you have this many people, it's not an extremely simple model, but it works. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes people are like, oh, but I don't use that -80. And it's like, well, I can't make I can't perfectly break down the cost for you, but I try to find a balance between what is a simple pricing model and what does not take a whole lot of time and effort to administer.
So give us an idea. You've got a couple people, say 3 people working back there in the lab. What do they end up paying per month?
So let's say you are Peak B, so your Pan is back there. She's making a blue food coloring that's based on cabbage, right? Right now, all of the blue food colorings you can find are kind of carcinogenic blue chemicals, right? So they're making one that's enzymatically produced via cabbage, right? They have 4 benches. They have a lot of lab space, 4 6-foot benches and 3 people. And I think they're paying like $2,000. No, less than $2,000. Yeah, less than $2,000 a month. That's right. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to do this in another location in Northern California, what's your best advice for them? It sounds like don't get wrapped up in equity.
If someone wanted to replicate my model someplace else, so I think it would be hard to do it in a town that didn't have a research university in it, right? Obviously, AgStart is doing the same thing up in Woodland, and they're great, and they're friends of ours. They serve the same population in the same way, but they're just in Woodland. It wouldn't work in Woodland if Davis wasn't here. Right. There's also H.M. Klaus, which has done a lot of the same kind of thing. So if you have a population that's doing a lot of kind of basic science innovation, then yes. If you're the beautiful town of Willits, in Northern California, which is beautiful.
It is beautiful.
But there's no research university there. Probably wouldn't work,
Yeah, unless there was some big company in the area that supported this sort of thing.
Correct, yeah. So the other times I've seen similar things like this, it's when you also have a big company like that, a big innovative company, which is shedding talent, right? So like Facebook moved to Seattle to poach Microsoft people. Right. So if you have a concentration of talent in a specific area, I could see that happening, because the people who have that talent in that area might be starting new things as they pop out of those big companies. But in the absence of that, I had someone from a town in, I think, West Virginia, call me up and ask a bunch of questions. And I'm like, what's the source of innovation, right? If you don't have that, then this doesn't.
Well, if it's Morgantown, West Virginia, that's got a DOE lab in it.
Well, it wasn't that.
It wasn't Morgantown. Okay.
Yeah.
Probably a different situation. So what's your dream for the future here?
Yeah, so Inventopia right now is part 1 of really 3 business entities that I would like to see exist, right? The one, Inventopia as it is right now, is a nonprofit, and we basically are the operating organization that runs the memberships, but then also takes the liability. We have when people are dealing with chemicals and all these other things, it's dangerous stuff. The person who owns the building wants to be insulated from liability from that. Right now, the landlord doesn't really participate in the overall deal. We just are tenants there. But the second phase of this that I'd like to see is for Inventopia to raise its own group of investors to buy a building and be its own landlord. So then the nonprofit is the operating partner, and we have a group of investors who own the building. That is super important, because let's say if you wanted to provide lab space, like biosafety level 2 lab space is in huge demand. There's a lot of people who come to me asking for it. I can't offer it because I have a 5-year lease, and to build that space and have it pay for itself in 5 years doesn't pencil, right? So if you have a building tenant who is really and the landlord are more closely aligned, you can do things like provide those kind of facilities that don't work in a normal kind of arm's length kind of lease relationship. So I would like to basically form our own landlord. So that's stage 2. And then stage 3 is to bring a little bit of capital into it. Tough tech companies like what we do here they're different than software. And so kind of VC capital, the way it exists right now, is really kind of developed for technologies that you can accelerate with money, right? If you are developing a mobile app or developing software, and I give you a huge pile of money, you can hire more developers, you can hire more marketing people, you can push that company down the road with cash. If you are like Startle, which is one of our tenants, they're developing a food drying technology that's based on a kind of novel material science sort of play. You can't make those results happen faster. You need cash to do those experiments, but you can't make them happen faster. Mm-hmm. If you're Interplant, who's a graduate from us, they're making plants that are sensors that will glow when they're attacked by a fungus. Huge deal for farmers because they don't have to spray prophylactically fungicide over everything, and they can also intervene. And so anyway, so it's a big deal for agriculture, but you're growing new plants and you can't pour money at the plants and make them grow faster. They grow on their own schedule. So having a capital source, which is more like what I call a venture studio, that understands tough tech sort of things and is more granular funding and also a little bit more hands-on, would be great. So then we'd have the landlord, we'd have the nonprofit, then we'd have a venture studio.
So
all together.
Do you have connections now with capital sources that are interested in the companies you host here?
So there's a capital source behind every single company here. And some of them I know, some of them I don't. It's a good question because I haven't really tied them all together, but that's mostly my fault for I'm kind of heads down and like because I don't work for Inventopia. I do consulting and I get distracted by that. But I'm hoping that we will be able to partner with the city of Davis, that I was telling you earlier,
right,
that we can start developing some partnerships that can help start putting those spaces together.
So there is no staff here, really?
There is no staff, yeah.
Okay, so it's just hosting companies. Well, it's an interesting place to start. And that's born from some experience you've had in earlier versions of Inventopia. And I'm sure.
Yeah, and also from my own startups, right? So with my last company, which was called Perfect, I once rented 2,000 square feet because I needed a place to plug in a CNC mill. And the CNC mill is the size of this table, but I needed a 3-phase outlet, and that wasn't available in the basement that I was currently at. After I graduated from there, I took 6,000 square feet, which for the first year and a half was way too big, and for the second year and a half was way too small, right? Companies that are in the startup phases are doing this. Mm-hmm. And so the more you can put off the commitment to your overhead and all that other stuff, the better, because it gives you a lot of flexibility. So Inventopia is what I wish I had when I was building that company, and it's now here for when I'm building my next company. I'll be doing it as well.
Well, we'll be reading the press releases for when that comes out. So at any rate, somebody wants to contact you and talk about space here, what's the website?
So it's inventopia.org, and I'm T. Keller at inventopia.org. And just drop us a line, and don't drop by, because I'm not always here.
Yeah, right.
Because I run the place, it's hard for me to work from here because I get interrupted all the time, so I tend to work from home. It's a little ironic that the guy who runs the place.
They want to talk to you, set up an appointment.
Set up an appointment, send me an email, or hit me on LinkedIn, and I'll come here and meet you and show you around.
That's great. Okay, so thanks so much, Tim.
My pleasure.